Yesterday, Sayadaw spoke about the fourth of the 5 factors called Padani Anga, the factors or the factors that a yogi possesses who is striving to reach liberation in this very life. This number 4 factor is very important, is most important. So this is the courage to avoid what brings harm to self and others. This is not something we have initially. We have to develop this courageous effort. And it's also the courage to plan, to speak, to do things that are free of fault, pure, wholesome. One has to have courage for doing good, that which is beneficial for oneself and others. And if one has this courageous effort, if one applies it again and again, then as the word atapa implies, one applies ardent effort to observe the object when it arises. And because one uses this ardent effort, the dampness of the kilesas can't enter regarding the object. So there will be no raga, no lust regarding the object, and no anger, no dosa. So if something becomes damp, then it becomes heavy. And one prevents this dampness from entering in with ardent effort. That means that this ardent effort provides heat which can dry up the kilesas, dry up the dampness that they have. So this means that this ardent effort has to have enough heat itself to do this. And therefore one has to apply effort strenuously, courageously. At first it seems like nothing special. It seems like nothing much is happening. But later, when one moment of effort becomes connected to the next and to the next, this effort gains full energy. And this is what is meant by Araddha Viriya, Viriya that has been developed through exercising the mind. Due to exercise, due to practice, the Viriya gains momentum, it becomes developed. And one who possesses this type of effort is called Araddha Viriyo. So this, in order to develop this type of effort, one has to practice, one has to exercise. Yesterday, Sayadaw described how 3 powers are present due to effort which has momentum. These powers are the Viriya, the power of Viriya, of Sati and Samadhi, the 3 members of the Samadhi group of the path. And when knowledge arises, there's the accurate aim that makes the mind meet with the object exactly, and knowledge of what the object is. Those 2 factors are the Panya group of the path. So this is how, as Sayadaw mentioned, the 5-fold path becomes present in our practice in a moment. And today this topic will be continued. Sila, the training of Sila, is involved each day because the yogis take the 8 precepts every day. And not breaking them, but keeping them as we take them every day. Our physical and verbal behavior. With our body and speech, we are avoiding misdeeds. So our physical and verbal behavior become free of fault. This is called anavajja in Pali. No one can blame our behavior at this time. There's no basis for blame. When one can live with physical and verbal purity. This is anavajja, being free of fault. Something that is free of fault is clean. There's no transgression due to lobha. There's no transgression due to dosa. And there's no use of drugs, intoxicants, and so on due to moha. So our body and speech are clean. Being free of fault, therefore clean, this means our behavior is refined, both physically and verbally. One's behavior becomes refined because either out of shame and fear of being coarse, behaving in a coarse way, one restrains oneself. Or one also, on the other hand, one may restrain oneself out of consideration for others, knowing that others don't like to be harmed, just as one doesn't want to be harmed oneself. So, for either of these reasons, one controls oneself, and this is good. So how peaceful the whole world would be if people would keep 5 precepts. When we control ourselves and keep from doing wrong physically and verbally because of our fear and shame of doing wrong, or because of consideration for others, then we gain true culture. Our behavior becomes very cultivated. And this is undeniable. It can't be denied that behavior like this is refined and cultured. It is important for every human being to have this type of culture. If one is a human, one should be truly human. When we don't keep the 5 precepts, then we are not truly human. When one keeps one's physical and verbal behavior clean, then refinement follows. And our behavior, when it becomes refined like this, brings coolness and peace. This behavior is peaceful for ourselves and for others. There's no heat of transgressions in our lives, so things are cool and peaceful. One controls oneself and keeps one's own personal world peaceful. And by controlling oneself, one also doesn't harm those around one. So to that extent, the environment becomes more peaceful too. It's like we make an oasis of peace with our sila. If there are many oases like this, if there are many little spots of peace in the world like this, then they can all become connected. And the world, if that were to happen, would flourish. The world would become luxuriant. To keep sila is not despicable. It's lovable, pleasing, and peaceful. This is the sila we are keeping. When we're in a situation where we encounter the opportunity to transgress, if we avoid transgressing, then this is called virati in Pali, virati sila. But here we don't encounter such situations. However, if we did, we would avoid them. So we have cetana, we have the cetana sila, we have the intention to keep sila. So this is the type of sila that we are keeping during the practice. And also, we are restraining our 5 sense doors, the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body. This sense restraint is also a form of sila. When we speak, of course, we don't have much to say. There's not much opportunity for speaking. We just report our experience to the teacher. But when we speak the truth. So in this way, right speech is involved, samma vaca. And what we do is also pure. So samma kammanta, right effort, right action, and samma ajiva, right livelihood. These factors are also present. So these are the three factors of the sila portion of the path. And when we observe every object, every moment of observation of the arising object and knowing, the other two groups of the path are involved. Whenever our observation, whenever we observe the object with Viriya, Sati and Samadhi, then the Samadhi Khanda, with its three parts, is present. And when the mind is concurrent with the object, rubbing against it, meeting it exactly with accurate aim, and knowledge is there, then the two factors of the Panya group, the wisdom portion of the path, are present. In addition, we have the three factors of Cetana sila kept on the intentional level. These automatically come about. In this way, the Eightfold Path is present every moment. This is called the Atengika Magga, the Eightfold Path to peace. Practice, as we are doing now, is not imaginary. One has faith that if we do this, if we undertake the practice according to these instructions, these things will result. So with our faith, we, starting with the rising and the falling, observe every arising object. This is practical. Those who are thinkers won't practice. What is happening now is free of the thinking process. And this is meaningful. So what is meaningful is useful. If something is without meaning, it is useless. So one can decide based on this that this is an important piece of work to do, and one needs to take a step forward and understand this. It is said, Araddha Viriyo Viharati, Akusalanang Dhammanang Pahanaya, Kusalanang Dhammanang Upasampadaya. So, Araddha Viriyo Viharati. So one applies ardent effort to observe what arises in one's being, whatever physical action, whatever feeling, good or bad, whatever mental activity, thought, reflection, whatever general activity, seeing, hearing, smelling, and so on. Within these large fields of observation, one applies effort to observe the individual, newly arising object time and again. Doing this, one is correcting oneself, one is adjusting oneself, one is developing mental control. And doing this repeatedly, one becomes skilled. So when one gains this type of control of one's mind, one's life has meaning. One's life becomes meaningful because one corrects oneself with a suitable method and has become skilled. Without skill in the practice, without applying effort, then the road to unwholesomeness is open. But when we apply Viriya, akusalanang dhammanang pahanaya, we are closing the door. We are not letting the unwholesome dhammas arise. We're not accepting them. Viriya does not accept them. And when the unwholesome dhamma, akusala dhamma, is not accepted, then there's room for wholesome dhammas to arise. Kusalanang dhammanang upasampadaya. So one creates wholesomeness and develops it, enlarges it. This is the meaning of upasampadaya. In every posture, whether sitting, standing, walking, lying down, there must always be ardent effort to observe in each posture. If one does this a lot, it's not for nothing. One reaches the point where one starts to experience benefits. To the extent one applies effort, then sati sticks with the object, and the mind arises together with sati. This mind is wholesome, kusala. If we were to forget, if sati was not present, then akusala would have a chance to arise. But as it says, akusalanang dhammanang pahanaya, this application of effort is to dispel the unwholesome dhammas. To the extent that sati arises, wholesomeness arises, the wholesome mind arises. And if sati is arising one time every second, then in 1 minute, there will be 60 occurrences of the wholesome mind. In 5 minutes, 300 occurrences of the wholesome mind. And in 1 hour, 3,600. This is mental developing the mind that arises together with sati, making it bigger, better, and stronger. With sati, the mind sticks with the object. Otherwise, the mind would slip off. It would scatter. There would be wanting to hear, smell, taste, touch good things, good sense objects. There would be wanting to harm or kill others. But because the mind sticks with the object due to sati, then we are free of this thinking about sense pleasures, free of thinking about harming others. Because the mind falls collectedly on the object, it doesn't become separated from the object. So there's no scattered mind or udicca, and there's no restlessness or remorse. This is akusalanang dhammanang pahanaya, dispelling the unwholesome dhammas by not giving them a chance to arise. And also kusalanang dhammanang upasampadaya, developing wholesome dhammas and bringing them to fulfillment. To the extent one applies effort, sati sticks with the object, and the mind becomes collected on the object. This mind is clean. Later on, the mind becomes concurrent with the object, and knowledge arises. So one knows stiffness or tension and other true natures, and one comes to know that stiffness is one thing. The mind that knows it is another. These two are separate. And one also comes to know how the mind and object are related as cause and effect. Because of the object of observation, the knowing mind arises. So one comes to see too cause and effect. This knowledge is correct, complete and knowing for oneself. To the extent one applies effort and sati sticks with the object, the mind becomes accurate, concurrent with the object, and knowledge arises. Then there's no chance for unwholesomeness, akusala, to arise. And this is what is meant by Araddha Viriya. Viriya which has momentum due to the practice. For those who have the objective of working to gain this type of ability to observe whatever arises, they understand that this method is extremely practicable, and with this objective of having in mind that they will work like this, they are able to bring this type of effort about. Without this type of effort, without this type of aim and objective to work to try to observe every arising object, without this objective, yogis will not come to see in this way. When we do the practice as now, we are walking the path that leads to the noble path. It is the forerunner path that precedes the noble path. In Pali, this is called Pobabhaga Magga. And when we know the method of practice and walk this path, one becomes skilled at improving one's life. With the factors of sila, one's physical and verbal behavior becomes lovable. With the factors of samadhi, the way one holds one's mind becomes truly human. And one doesn't even transgress in one's mind, much less physically. When wholesomeness arises, one dispels it immediately by observing it. Just like fighting a fire, first of all, we try to prevent fire from breaking out, but if it breaks out, then we have to put it out right away. The samadhi kanda is like that. And later, when the factors of knowledge, the panya magga, the two factors of the panya portion of the path arise, then not only do we have normal human knowledge, but we have special human knowledge that makes us better than average. So when we do this, our life goes in the right direction. We know how to live our life in the correct way. It is said, Araddha Viryo Viharati means to dwell. And this doesn't mean just sitting, or just standing, just walking, or just lying. It's not just the small postures, minor postures such as bending, stretching, blinking, leaning, bending the head, and so on. What viharati means is to dwell with sati. That is, due to effort, to observe every arising object, whether one is sitting, making the effort to observe the object, standing, making the effort to observe the object, walking, making this effort to observe, lying, making the effort, applying ardent effort, so that there will be sati and also knowledge. The yogis who have come here, please examine your daily life. One must always be applying effort to observe, whether sitting, standing, walking, or lying down. When you are walking, are you applying ardent effort to observe the object? When you are sitting down, do you apply ardent effort to observe every arising object, starting with the rising and the falling. And at the end of the sitting, when you go from sitting to standing, do you do so with observation, trying to observe all that happens in that process? When bending and stretching and perform other small actions, do you apply effort to observe? And in walking, with every step, is sati there? Is there observation each time the foot moves? When one reaches the path, the end of the path, where one is doing the walking meditation, does one observe the standing position with care? Does one observe the turning and other activities when one eats or drinks or bathes, puts on one's clothes, when one enters, one gets into bed, sitting down on the edge of the bed, moving one's arms, adjusting one's legs, leaning, lying, pulling the covers around one. All these movements need to be observed with ardent effort. And if one examines oneself and finds that one is not practicing with this type of respect or meticulous care or continuity, then one is only going through the motions. So one has to understand that this lack of constant application of ardent effort is the cause for not seeing anything special in the practice. What we have to do at the start is have in mind that I'm going to try to observe every object. I'm not going to miss a single object. You have to start out having that in mind. When you do this, Viriya, Sati, Samadhi, and Panya will arise one by one. One also has to report clearly and specifically to the teacher. One has to not report what one thinks has happened. Some yogis take a lot of time and they don't talk about what is really happening in their practice. They just talk about what they imagine. So if this forerunner path of practice, the Pobabhaga Magga, arises, how valuable this is. One should take a look and see for oneself. When these factors of the path are present, then one's life is clean, one's life is beneficial and suitable. So one is behaving like a true human being, and one's attitude is truly human. When knowledge develops, as one becomes more and more free of the gravitational pull of the kilesas, informed faith will arise. And Sayadaw is speaking about this. This is now 1 month of the retreat is over, and this is the 5th day of the 2nd month. So Sayadaw says that within 1 week of practice, there's nothing special developing, then it is better not to continue. So this is his warning for today. That's all for today. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.